How's it going, everybody? It's that time of year again, as we're coming out of winter, that I like to start getting little fruit trees into the ground so they can start growing into the warmer months of the year. And what I've got here is a little avocado, and he's ready to go in the ground. Now, one thing you've got to remember is when you plant little baby avocado trees, is they don't like the heat, and they don't like the sun. It doesn't do them any good at all. So it's quite important to protect these little things for the first year of their growth, especially from the sun and especially from the drying effects of the wind that we get here. So this video today is not about actually planting the tree, it's actually creating a little structure that's basically free, and it'll protect this little seedling quite happily while it's in the ground for that first year. And what I've got here is a little tent peg. I find these things everywhere. And I'm actually amazed at how many people have actually got old tents just lying around that they don't use anymore. And I'm always the first one to say, can I have your tent pegs, please? Because they're a very useful little material. They're normally free. And this is my main source of creating little temporary structures for my little fruit trees. And it requires very minimal work. And I like that. So let's have a look at how I do this, eh? So basically the first thing you got to do is work out where that sun is directly hitting the little plant that you're putting in the ground. And it's normally out towards the west, a little bit out towards the north. And also, you've also got to establish what sort of winds you get. So wind will be a different force depending on whether you live at the bottom of a hill, halfway up a hill, or basically at the top of a hill. And because we're basically halfway on top of the hill here, we get some pretty strong winds, especially from the west. So they're the ones that I want to shelter the little plant from. So once those things are established, all you got to do is you start knocking 3 of these posts, or tent pegs, in the ground. Longer the better, doesn't matter how long they are. So, and there's another little trick that I do after I tie all these things together. Now you can use basically wire, you can use grey tape, you can use zippy ties, use whatever you want. Okay, doesn't matter, as long as it's sort of serving the purpose and creating that little structure for that little plant. So all you got to do is, once you've established the orientation where this sun hits and the factor of the wind and all those other things, you can start knocking it up. So all I have to do is basically work out where I am, so as you can see, I've basically just knocked 3 of them in the ground, and that's basically given me something to start tying this shade cloth onto. But first what I need to do is, you can see they're just going to flap in the breeze if I start tying anything onto this. So what I do is I use little fiberglass tent pegs, but you can use anything, timber, more of these things, whatever you got at the time. And I'll basically brace, go from this peg to this peg and tie a little brace on there, and I'll go from this peg over to that peg there, tie a little brace on it, so I've got something a little bit more structural that I can start tying shade cloth onto. So another little resource I like to use, and I've got heaps of these, palm leaves. They're great for creating shade. So basically all I do with these palm fronds is I just tie them to the little tent pegs that I put in and just let them hang over the top. It kind of replicates a little bit of speckled shade. It moves around, it does a thing. It kind of looks cool too, so that's why I don't mind it. Yeah, it still looks a little bit floppy. But what happens is when you put the shade cloth on it, tensions it up a bit, makes it a little bit more sturdy. So I use tie wire to basically attach the shade cloth to these little posts. Now a little trick is when you first open up a roll of wire that looks like this, don't pull it from the outside. It'll just end up in a tangled mess. So what you do is get a bit of grey tape, or any sort of tape, and just run a bit of tape around the outside there. Just like that, nice and simple. And then what you do is you take it out from the inside. It comes out nice and easy, okay? Just like that. Tie wire. So basically all you got to do now is just start stitching it onto those little tent pegs. You cut a few little short beads of tie wire, a pair of nips, use pliers if you don't have nips. These are the go. So that's pretty much it. So basically what you end up with at the end of it, you might have to tweak a few things and just anchor it a little bit differently to how I've done here. But the point being is, this little structure is going to be here for about a year. Okay, now it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but it does have to withstand the elements. And because I get such strong winds racing up this hill through here, I basically just had to reinforce that corner there with a star picket. And basically when you're finished, put your little plant in the ground. Now I always put the plants in the ground after I've built the little structures. I don't want them sitting in the sun. And as you can see, it's just getting a nice amount of light. Nothing that's too harsh. And secondly, the reason why I do it like this, because I see a lot of people just wrapping shade cloth and just throwing shade cloth over them. I really don't like the fact that that shade cloth is in contact with those little delicate leaves, and they are delicate leaves. So also it's got airflow, it can happily just do its own thing, and that shade cloth is just well away from that little plant. So that's pretty much it. And like I said, that took me about half an hour, and it was well worth it. So that's a new little happy little home for that little house avocado tree. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.